scheduling or if you're interested in services or other things from us, Laura will keep note of those. If we can't answer them during the webinar, she'll have a list to follow up with everybody, or to follow up with people that ask questions. So if you see Joe refer questions back to Laura, they may be things that we have to get back to you on, so we'll do our best to do that. My name is Tom Mears. I'm the senior principal here at Result Data. I head up the advisory services offerings here at Result Data, so I do a lot of strategic consulting engagements. My background has traditionally been technical. I'll be doing the presentation today, but if we get into the kind of the heavy lifting of the technical stuff, that's why we have Joe here, because he's much deeper with the products than I am, so we should be able, hopefully, to answer any questions that you guys have. As I mentioned, you'll see that little control panel pop up from the GoToWebinar software. You can collapse that panel if it's taking up too much of your screen, or you can hit the full screen view icon on the left side of that panel. And then, as I mentioned, there's a question chat area where you can type in questions. So please feel free to do that, and Joe will be monitoring that area and trying to answer any questions that you have. Here's my contact information. Of course, if you just go to resultdata.com, you can get our generic email, which is resultdata@resultdata.com, or call our main number, which is on the website, and Laura will get you in touch with me. So feel free to follow up if you have questions or there's anything we can help you with. It's very easy to contact us, and we do appreciate you joining us for the webinar. So I promise not to spend a lot of time on propaganda with you guys, but this is a little bit about what we do. So just so if you're new to Result Data and don't know who we are, we've been around since 1996, and we specialize in business intelligence and analytics consulting. So we do things like data warehouse design build services. We do a lot of data management services, so ETL, data modeling, data mapping, data integration, both in the cloud and on-premise. And we've done just a tremendous amount of dashboard and report content development services over the years. So we've done a lot with Crystal Reports, with Microsoft SQL Server integration services, with Microsoft SQL Server reporting services. We also do some things with Jasper Reports and some of the open source products. We also do some software development services, so we're .NET developers, PHP web application developers. And then we also run the training center for Qlik and do some SQL training and other things here at Result Data in Columbus, as well as virtually online. We have customers all across North America, so it's not unusual for us to be working with folks on either of the coasts or in other states. Our key partnerships are, we're a Microsoft Gold partner specializing in the data platform competency, which basically is the SQL Server platform, and we are a Qlik elite solution provider and training center, so we specialize in the Qlik software as well. Some of our key technology skills are QlikView, QlikSense, Imprinting, as I mentioned, SQL Server, Power BI, Jasper Reports, Talent ETL, and then we still do a little bit of SAP Business Objects and Crystal Reports work as well. So we have a long history with those tools. So our agenda today. We're going to talk a little bit about the analysis and reporting ecosystem, so we'll give you some background. Try not to bore you too much with that, but I think it's good to have a conceptual overview and have a sense of kind of where the market is. This is a good opportunity especially for the folks more interested in the technical details of the products and the solutions, to kind of see where the market is headed and where the vendors are taking us and where Gartner is taking us and so forth. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that. Then we'll dive into some of the dilemmas that we're seeing in the market across our customer base over the last couple of years. Primary in that is this inconsistency between dashboards and reporting, so we'll kind of outline that for you and talk about that dilemma and why it exists and what kinds of problems are emerging. We'll also take a quick look at the difference between desktop self-service analytics and what we call governed self-service analytics, and give you an overview of kind of how we think the market will evolve. One of the reasons we like Qlik and what they're doing is they have a good governance model around how they facilitate end users creating their own data visualizations and so forth. So we'll talk a little bit about that. we'll talk about the idea of analytical data semantics and materialization. So getting the data that end users work with to create their own visualizations, create their own dashboards and reports, getting the semantics and the materialization of that data standardized and governed, and why that's important, and what are some of the dilemmas when we don't have that. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about reporting and about how important it really still is. In fact, we'll cover that in the ecosystem slides as well. So we will get into quite a bit about reporting and how, kind of this idea of everything being a data visualization on the desktop doesn't necessarily address the majority of issues for a lot of organizations, especially larger enterprise organizations. And then we'll have a couple of quick demonstrations where we're going to show you the Qlik products. And we're going to get into the weeds a little bit on this. So we'll start out with some kind of end user stuff so that you can kind of see what the products are. If you haven't looked at Qlik Sense or looked at Qlik Imprinting, we'll demonstrate those at a high level, but we'll also go underneath the hood a little bit in those products so that we can relate some of these ideas of analytical data semantics and materialization and governance to the user interface and how that flows. So if we take a look at the data analysis and reporting ecosystem, the way it exists today, we're seeing three primary areas of business intelligence and analytics use cases. And it's kind of important to have this framework so that you understand when you're looking at different tools and different solutions to provide data visualization and dashboards and reports to your end users. It's kind of good to have a sense of how that content gets categorized. The first area we call is guided analytics. Guided analytics is what we think of as pre-designed dashboards or embedded data visualizations, embedded charts that are embedded inside of a website or inside of a custom application. Pre-designed dashboards would be where an analyst or an IT group builds a dashboard, deploys it, and then it's consumed by a large number of users. And while they may have a high degree of interactivity with the data and be able to kind of personalize that dashboard a little bit, the basic construct of the dashboard is pre-designed and predetermined. We call that guided analytics because we're guiding the user through an analytical process and providing sort of the complex expression, syntax, and so forth is embedded in that dashboard and made available for the users to consume. The second category we call self-service analytics, and this has become a very popular area. And this has basically three subcategories. One is called dashboard personalization. So that's the idea of a pre-designed dashboard being deployed, and then there being some ability to augment or alter or change that dashboard by the end user so that if they see something in a format that they don't like, they can change it. They can maybe add a new sheet to that dashboard, add their own visualizations to that dashboard, but they didn't have to deal with all the underlying data and all the relationships in the data from the ground up. The second category we call visualization/dashboard creation, and that's an area where end users are actually building their own dashboards, their own data visualizations from the ground up. We like to think of that as something that should sit on top of governed data as much as possible so that users aren't just kind of gathering data in Excel and producing their own visualizations and being in conflict with each other and in conflict with corporate standards for how we calculate things. But the basic idea of that second category in self-service analytics is the user is the creator. The user is the author of the visualization of the dashboard from the ground up. And then the third category, we won't really get into this too much today, is data science. That's more of an advanced self-service analytics role. So typically we think of that as a Java programmer writing MapReduce code for Hadoop, or a person with very strong SQL skills that's going out and writing complex SQL and pulling data in and maybe using some data integration or ETL tools to do their own integration and assembly of data and preparation of data. That doesn't represent a very high number of people in most organizations. We won't address it, but it does fall into that kind of grand category of self-service analytics. Third category is reporting. Kind of have three basic ideas here. This is pretty old stuff. Most organizations and folks that have been around the industry understand what reporting is. We talk about online reporting, being able to access a report via a web browser and view that report whenever we want. We talk about distributed reports where we can produce a report on a scheduled basis, have it attached to an email as a PDF or Excel file, and sent out to people and distributed. And the third is where we embed that online report concept into a custom application so that as people are using the application, they're able to access reports. And that is, we kind of think of that as a legacy solution, but it's still very, very popular, as you see as we talk about this with different slides. So self-service analytics is growing in popularity, so we're seeing more and more of it. However, dashboard and report consumption still represents the majority of use cases, and in a lot of cases, they're not replaced by self-service. So I think the aspiration by the vendors and by the IT departments often is, let's enable our end users to do their own analytics as much as possible. But the reality is there's a large number of people in most enterprises that simply want to be able to log in and look at a report, or log in and access a dashboard and click around and filter the data and see the data in different ways to answer a question. They don't want or need to have the ability to build their own data visualizations and build their own dashboards from the ground up. So we're still seeing, if you kind of look at the slide, the reporting and the guided analytics or dashboard scenario kind of outweighing the self-service analytics. Even though the vendors are pushing very hard towards self-service, and probably down the road there's more and more of that, we still have a preponderance of need in guided analytics and in reporting. This is our kind of business intelligence content pyramid, we call this. And if you think of this pyramid as the primary areas of use case for business intelligence and reporting, at the bottom of the pyramid is the widest area, and that is where the most users are. So online and distributed reports, if you go out and look at an enterprise organization, there are many, many more people receiving a report as a PDF attachment or accessing a report online than there are people doing anything else. So that remains a very large area of information distribution and reporting. Dashboard consumption has fallen into that category as well. So we've seen a lot of people who were receiving or accessing online reports or receiving distributed reports start to move towards accessing a pre-designed, what we call guided analytics dashboard, where they got this report and all they really cared about was looking at the third page of the report to get an answer to a question every Monday or every other day or every month. And the dashboard becomes a little bit more efficient and productive way for them to do that, because they can interact with the data through the dashboard and they can see data visualized a little bit better. And then a good dashboard is also going to have the ability to export that data, right? So if they want to pull that data down into Excel and do more with it, they can do that as well. The middle area of the pyramid, where we have less users, but we're seeing some growth in, is this self-service area. So we kind of have the two scenarios, sort of a common self-service analytics scenario and an advanced self-service analytics scenario. And we'll talk about both of those, and I'll give you kind of a quick demonstration of both of those with respect to the ClickSense product. Those areas are kind of where we're seeing the vendors really push towards. So if you look at the Gartner leaders in business intelligence and analytics, all three of them are really focused in that area. Yes, they still do the guided analytics stuff too, and you can see the circle kind of goes down into that area, but the push is, let's empower the users, let's give them these tools that allow them to create their own visualizations. If you look down the left-hand side, you see sort of the types of people that fall into those categories. And at the bottom, you see everyone. So whether you're a data scientist, a CEO, a business analyst, a subject matter expert, you're likely to, at some point in time in your week-to-week or day-to-day work life, access a dashboard or access an online report or get a report distributed to you. You fall into that use case. So these use cases aren't mutually exclusive, right? If you look at the common self-service area, that would be where we have a lot of information workers, people whose job it is to get answers to questions for management, for decision making. So business analysts, data analysts, and so forth tend to fall into that area. And the preponderance of those people tends to be situations that reoccur, right? That commonly reoccur. So we have the same kind of question that comes up once a week or once a day, and we need to be able to go in and maybe fiddle with the data a little bit, but basically the pattern of analysis is consistent. You move up a little bit from there and you're into analysts and power users, and these are people who really want to create their own visualization and probably are better at expression writing. So think Excel formulas, advanced Excel formulas, but within a BI tool, think of writing expressions or formulas to derive data to show things in a different way than maybe they've been shown in the guided analytics dashboard. And then at the very top of that, you have your data scientists and your BI developers that are really strong on SQL and maybe some underlying languages like Java, where they can actually build analytical applications. So that kind of gives you a sense of how the system breaks down. If we look at that pyramid from the perspective of where things are headed, we see growth really in all areas, but we see the most growth up towards the top of the pyramid. So I think there's a number of factors that are driving that, not the least of which is the vendors are pushing for more self-service and providing tools that make it easier for people to self-serve. We're also seeing the information worker population become more data aware and more data skilled as younger people come into that system. And as older people develop new skills, we're seeing more and more people wanting to do self-service or interested in it or capable of it. So we're seeing more growth at the top of the pyramid than we're seeing at the bottom of the pyramid. But what's important to keep in mind is the bottom of the pyramid still remains the biggest part of the consumption model, right, of the content consumption model, and it grows too. It just isn't growing at the same rate. So you're not going to see as much online and distributed reporting as you saw before, but that doesn't mean that in the coming years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years out, that you're going to see distributed reporting and online reporting completely replaced by self-service, or dashboards completely replaced by self-service. You're going to see growth across all those areas. And you may see more growth at the top in advanced self-service analytics than you see anywhere else, but that doesn't mean that that's where the most use cases and that's where the most users need to be. So I think the paradigm is shifting, it's changing, it will continue to change, but it's important to understand that the guided analytics, the predefined dashboards, and the online and distributed reports remain really important. So if we just take a quick look at this from the perspective of SQL or of technologies, right? Technologies and tools. This is kind of how the pyramid aligns to things. If you look at the bottom, you've got online reports with parameters. You've got PDF or Excel attachments to email, and those are going to be tools very much like what you see from Crystal Reports, from SQL Server reporting services, etc. And those are really popular tools with lots of distribution and lots of with a large customer base today. Dashboards are kind of the next area up, and we're seeing predefined dashboards that users interact with, where they can select data, they can change what the visualizations are showing, they can do some what-if scenarios on there. Qlik and competitors of Qlik kind of fall into that category. Traditionally, if you think QlikView as the legacy product at Qlik, that's really what QlikView was designed to do. QlikSense certainly does that and does it reasonably well, but it is really transcends up into the next category, which is the self-service analytics. So in self-service analytics, you're talking about dashboards that are at the common level, that are dashboards that are kind of predefined, and users go in and augment them. So users may personalize the way in which the pre-existing visualizations in those dashboards look, but they might also add completely new tabs or new sheets to those dashboards and build their own visualization. So they're augmenting and enhancing and altering dashboards, and as they move up a little higher, they're now accessing data sources directly. They may be accessing governed data sources. We'll talk about that in our demonstrations, but they may also be accessing non-governed data sources, and they're building their own visualizations and their own dashboards off of whatever data they can get their hands on. And that's the more advanced level. And then when you get to the top of the pyramid into data science, you're talking about advanced SQL skills, advanced data management and developer level skills. So that just kind of gives you a sense of how tools and technology align to all this. So this kind of presents a problem for us because we've had these online reports for a long time, and now we've moved into this data visualization dashboarding scenario, and now we're even evolving from that into the self-service analytics scenario. And we end up with unintegrated data. We end up with a situation where most business intelligence tools don't unify or integrate data, or they don't do it well between dashboards and reports. So you might have a dashboard that pulls data from a couple of different data sources and integrates the data for the purpose of the dashboard, but then you have a report that's operating independently of how that data is being integrated to represent the same thing, maybe the details of what's in the dashboard. And having inconsistencies between dashboards and reports can result in untrusted data, reduced value, reduced adoption of your analytical and reporting solutions, and really challenge the investment that managers and leadership has to make in these tools. So there's nothing cheap about these tools. There's nothing cheap about some of the data tools that lay underneath them, the data warehouse and ETL tools. All this stuff is expensive, and because we have reporting on one side and visual analytics and dashboards on the other, and the data is not unified between them in a lot of cases, we have this untrusted data, and then when users don't trust data, we all know what happens. They stop using the solution. They consider it worthless. So an example of that would be inconsistencies that occur when a dashboard is updated. It might issue an SQL query out to an underlying data source at 10 a.m. and get a data set back, and that data set summarizes the data and is used in the dashboard. And then we may have a set of reports that run at 1 p.m. that issue maybe the same query, maybe a different query, okay? There's no necessarily any consistency between the way those queries are run, and that data set comes back. And so we have two basic problems with these inconsistencies. One is the business rules or the technical logic that's used to get the data and return it to the content being either the dashboard or the report, may or may not be consistent across both the dashboards and the reports. And the second is the time during which those queries are run, even if they are consistent, may vary, and that latency in time can end up resulting in differences in the data set. So you've got one user who uses the report, another user who uses the dashboard, and even though maybe we've done diligence and IT's done a great job of making sure the queries are identical because they were run at different times and the underlying data sources were updated at different times, they are not getting the same results. And so we have this inconsistency problem, and that's a result of no governance and no standards for how things are done. It's a common problem, by the way. So if you're shaking your head yes and you're saying yeah, we have this problem, just about everybody has this problem. So you shouldn't feel badly that you know, you're behind the curve or anything. We deal with it all the time in our practice. So other causes are you know, we talk about different data sources, so no data warehouse or analytical data store concept. That's what we mean by ADS, analytical data store. So basically users are querying on their own, and they're assembling data from unstructured data sources like Excel or CSV files, or from the cloud or from the web. They may be pulling some governed data into their dashboard, but they're basically doing their own data management. We sometimes refer to that as shadow IT, but they're building their own data management solutions, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. And it's not the user's fault. They don't know any better. They're just trying to get their job done. But you get that bleeding through the organization, and you get some really inconsistent results. User data. Users assembled and created data means that, you know, they can pull data into Excel and they can augment it, right? They can type stuff into Excel and change the way that their numbers look, and that can be a governance problem as well. Dashboards In the enterprise, we'll typically use some sort of trusted data source, so a data warehouse, an analytical data store. When they're formally defined and they're put out there as guided analytics, reports do the same thing typically. So the typical reporting scenario is to use an enterprise data source, and that won't usually jive with what the users created. And that kind of drives us to a kind of a quick discussion around desktop versus governed self-service analytics. So this big push towards analytics, you know, you can download ClickSense Desktop for free and you can install it on your desktop and you can point it at whatever data source you want, local Excel files or databases or cloud data or APIs or whatever, and you can build whatever dashboard you want. When you do that from the desktop, there's no opportunity for the data governance team or for the IT team to ensure that the data that you're pulling in is vetted or is accurate or is managed in any way. So if you look at the bottom, you see self-service analytics desktop and you see the great big Excel icon over on the right, and most of that self-service analytics is sitting on top of Access or Excel on the desktop, and there's a myriad of problems with that, but the big concern is that data, there's no vetting of that data. So if that end user is very meticulous and very careful, those dashboards may be fine. Those visual analytics may be very valuable and may drive good results for the business. If they miss something though, they could be way off. So that can become a problem. The other problem that you can run into with unstructured, non-governed data is volumes, right? So even Excel 2016, the latest release of Excel, is limited to 1 million rows. Sometimes we need to analyze on more than 1 million rows, and so we find users dumping data into Access and hitting the limits of that, and then cutting and pasting segments of that data back into Excel and putting it in a pivot table and manipulating it, and then sticking their data visualization tool on top of that. It's a kind of an organic way of getting things done, but it isn't ideal. So governed analytics may include supplemental data. So if we think about the area up above, where we have governed self-service analytics, the idea would be that the majority of data that goes into our dashboards and our visualizations is coming from a governed data source. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by that, at least with respect to the Qlik environment. But the governed data source is where the data is prepared, vetted, validated ahead of time, and then we build our analytics on top of that. But even with governed data sources, there's going to be some supplemental data that the user wants to add. So there's going to forever be situations where you've got a sales administrator or a sales manager that has territory changes that they keep track of in Excel, and they want to look at sales across the new territory model, and the new territory model hasn't found its way into the governed data store scenario, right? So we don't have a master data management solution in place. We don't have a data warehouse that we can update. So we don't have a situation where we can, basically get the right territory model into our visual analytics. So we have to supplement that with Excel or with some user data. In future webinars, we'll talk about solutions that we've come up with at Result Data on how to address that supplemental, or what we call user data management scenario, and provide some governance around it without pulling Excel away and telling end users that they can't have any say in it anymore, because that never works. That just drives you back to them doing their own thing with Access and Excel and not telling you. So we've got some solutions around that, and we'll talk about that in future webinars if you choose to join us. Analytics, data semantics, and materialization. So let's cover this really quick. So the idea is that if we pull the data from the various data sources and we materialize it, we can now do things to it to make sure that it is valid, and also that it has the proper semantics. And by semantics, what we mean is that the structure of the data and the names that we use in the data are business friendly, right? So that we can facilitate self-service. So if you look at this, the core concept is to provision data into a governed data source. It could be a database, it could be a set of files, and then this process can run on a schedule. It can run hourly or daily or weekly or whatever, but this process runs on a schedule. The materialization is important. In other words, copying the data from that source over into that governed data source is important, because what it means is if we use that governed data source to drive all three types of content, dashboards, self-service, and reports, the latency of the data is the same for all three. right? So we've run into situations, especially in large kind of Fortune 100 type enterprise environments, where there's a reluctance to copy or duplicate data because they have so much data and they've duplicated it so many times it becomes problematic for them. But if your view is we're never going to duplicate data, we're always going to federate, we're going to go back and pull the data from the underlying data sources directly without duplicating the data into a governed data store, you're going to have that latency problem for sure, okay? And there's really no way to solve it other than to go back to that underlying data source and validate that when you pull the data for each of these use cases, you're pulling the data for the same time range, right? And it's just really, really difficult to do. So that governed data store does two things. It gives you the semantics, the business-friendly naming and derivations of data that are standardized, and it also gives you latency consistency across all those data sources. So what are semantics? So we talk about this, we use these fancy terms, semantics, and you think of them as business-friendly names. So if you look at to the right of the slide there, you see what we might see in a data warehouse. We see a dimension called customer. That's why it says dim_customer. End users don't necessarily understand these naming conventions. You can kind of tell what these fields are. You can see that we have a customer ID, a customer name, a customer city, items ordered, order costs, etc. But that's probably not how a lot of information workers want to see the data. We want to see more friendlier names like you see on the right, with spaces in them and proper capitalization and so forth. So when we materialize the data, when we create governed data, we clean up the semantics, okay? We also provide some rules for derived data. So you can see over on the right that we have an order count field instead of items ordered. So what we've done is we've taken the items ordered and we've said, okay, how many orders do each of those items represent and what's the total number of orders for each customer? So we can derive data into that store. And then finally, if you take a look at the bottom there, there's a field called CEO email in the underlying data source that we simply don't bring over into the governed data because it shouldn't be made available. Or if we bring it over, we might bring it over for a version of that governed data that's available only to certain people so that not everybody can get access to the CEO's email. So we have some security that we can implement around that governed data as well as the semantics and the derivation of the data. So it kind of keeps us consistent on those things. Okay, so additional value of materialization. So many BI and A tools do not materialize or duplicate the data outside of the memory footprint. So all tools, whether it's Crystal Reports or reporting services or any of the BI and A tools, all tools are going to bring data into memory kind of the way Excel does. And they're going to operate on that data in memory so that they can produce their charts and they can produce their tables of data and you can interact with the data a little bit, right? So all tools have at least a small memory footprint. Very few of them produce that data outside of their in-memory footprint. In other words, materialize that data on disk. And it's the materialization of that data on disk that gives us the governance capability, right? So that's one of the benefits here is if whether we do it within the tool or whether we do it in a data warehouse or in some other mechanism with files, the idea of getting that data materialized and organized and then updated on an hourly or daily basis is important, and it brings a lot of value. The other thing that it does is it allows us to produce potentially different data sets, different governed data sets from the same ETL or same data integration process for different purposes. So, and we'll show you a little bit with this with Qlik where we use QVD files, but we can create a data set specific for the developers and we can omit data from that data set that we don't want the developers to see, or we can obscure that data, right? So as we process the data, we produce a production data set that goes out to our production server to drive our dashboards and reports for production, and then we create a subset of that data for the developers that has certain fields obscured so that they can't see things like salary information, for instance. And then also that developer data set might have less rows, right? It might have 100,000 rows instead of 10 million rows so that the developers can reload that data multiple times and they can do their development effort without having to wait hours and hours and hours for a 10 million or 100 million or or billion row data set to load. So this idea of materialization solves a myriad of problems, not just the governance problem, but it also gives us the ability to optimize our development and information worker effort. And it can actually result in eliminating the need to have a dev test database or a dev test data warehouse, because you've got this, all your content's being based on this governed data, in the case of Qlik, in a QVD data architecture, QVD file data architecture. So finally, reporting, kind of important. So it's sort of the missing link. Data visualization versus reporting. Visualization tools tend to limit the data available outside of the tool to a snapshot or an image. They can export data sets to Excel or CSV and grids of data, okay, but they can't export large amounts of data, and sometimes people want detailed reports. So many users need the ability to export more of the dashboard. They want to see multiple visualizations on one page. They want to see kind of an executive quality report. In some cases, the preferred data delivery method is via email. So obviously, dashboards are not a mechanism for doing that, so it's not possible in most visualization tools. One of the things we like about Qlik is they have added this in-printing product on, and that gives us the ability to do that, right? We can take that same governed data that we use in the dashboards and we can move it out. It's less than ideal to have to use different tools for reporting versus dashboarding in terms of the data preparation, right? It gets us back into that situation where the reports are pulling data one way and the dashboards are pulling data another. So we'll show you how having the same basic underlying data architecture for both reporting and dashboards can be done with, at least with Qlik. The sort of historical legacy answer to that is to have a data warehouse of some sort, right, or an analytical data store, an ODS, a data mart, etc. And it's important to keep in mind with respect to reporting that there are still more use cases for reporting than for self-service solutions, many more, right? And there will be for some time to come, maybe forever, who knows? And self-service, as that grows, as we do more, personalization of dashboards and self-service creation of visualizations, that often drives the need for more reports, because as we discover things in the data, we realize, we have maybe our field team, who don't have the ability to access dashboards and do analytics themselves because they're out in the field. If we could send them a PDF every hour, then that would be helpful to them. So as we do more self-service analytics, we create new opportunities and new value for some of the online reporting and some of the guided analytics dashboard stuff. So one sort of drives the other in that respect. And it's typically the reporting following the self-service stuff, not the other way around, but it could go both ways. So remember, ideally, the same governed data drives self-service dashboards and reports. That's the ideal scenario. That's the that's the silver bullet if you can make it happen. Inconsistencies between reports and visualizations, when separate tools are used, can be a big problem, right? And at a minimum, you probably want good enough lineage documentation on everything to understand what those inconsistencies are and why they occur. And then we'll show you we're going to move in here and do some demos for you, and we'll show you how Qlik helps with all this. So we'll jump right into the first demo, try to get through this stuff as quickly as possible so that we can let you guys move on to your workday. In this demo one, we'll be creating governed data. And unifying disparate data quickly and in high volume. So we'll show you how we can pull data in from multiple data sources and unify it quickly and easily. And then we'll show you an example of some high volume, because I think that's one of the other things that we don't see in visualization tools often enough is getting beyond the million row threshold, right? So most tools handle 1 million rows okay, but when you get above that, things get a little dicey. So we'll show you an example of that. We'll show you self-service in the second demo at 2 levels. So we'll show you kind of some more sophisticated self-service where there's some ground-up content creation off of governed data versus augmentation or enhancement of existing data visualization dashboards, and then leveraging governed data in reporting and report distribution. We'll show you some examples of imprinting and how we create a report in imprinting, and then how that can be consumed, and how that creation of that report is based off of data that has already flown through the ClickSense system and is governed and is the same data that we're using to drive dashboards. So we'll pop into that. So our first demo, creating governed data, unifying disparate data quickly and in high volume. I'm going to give you a very quick, very quick overview of ClickSense, just so that you understand what it is, just so that you can see a ClickSense application. This would be an example of a guided analytics dashboard or a pre-designed dashboard. So I'm going to show you that first. Then we're going to show you a little bit about blending data from SQL Server and Excel. So we'll pull data from 2 disparate data sources and blend it in so that you can see how that works. And we'll do some, we'll show you, or at least we'll talk a little bit about how we add semantics and derived values into that data, and then how we materialize that data back out to disk as a governed data source, right? So materializing that data in the Qlik world, we call this Qlik data files or QVDs. We will move that data out to data files that can then be leveraged in dashboards, self-service analytics, and as well as in reports. And then we'll do a quick example of I think it's actually a 5 million row simple dashboard, just so that you can see a high volume of data being accessed and get a sense of how that works. So materializing data. So we kind of looked at this before. We're going to grab data from 2 data sources. We're going to create something called a QVD generator. So this is the ClickSense application that will simply pull the data in and integrate it and clean it up, and then it will output data to these QVD files. Optionally, it could also output that data to CSV, which is an optional, common format, so that data could be used in other systems. And then those QVD files will be used to drive guided analytics dashboards, or ClickSense applications, ClickSense self-service, and end printing reports. So this becomes our point of governance, and then these become automated processes once we set them up. So we're going to switch over to our ClickSense environment. Okay, and what we're in right now is what's called the ClickSense Hub. So this is all web browser based. So all of ClickSense is web browser. We don't have a tool that we have to install on the desktop to do our content creation or content consumption. Everything's done in the browser. And I'm just going to go into a demonstration dashboard that I put together that we typically use to demonstrate ClickSense. When you open up ClickSense application, you'll see the various tab sheets appear. So you can have kind of any number of tab sheets, and each sheet represents potentially different kinds of information. So we'll go into the order analysis, which is our main dashboard, and we'll take a look, and you can see that we have order information. We have it broken out by region and city, product category on the right, date ranges, and so forth. And because Qlik is materializing all this data in memory, when we look at a dashboard, we can interact with it, and we can interact with it in relatively high volume. So if I pick California here as a region and commit that selection, you'll notice that on the left, all of the cities in California move to the top of the city list box, and all the cities not associated with California show up in gray down below. And because Qlik has all data available all the time, and we're not really issuing an SQL query back to a database and getting rid of data, I can actually come down here and I can click on a city that's not in California. When I do that, if I commit that selection, you'll see up in my region box, Colorado moved to the top, shows up in white, and then the city I selected, Aspen, shows up in green here. So we have this ability to sort of look at both associated and non-associated values with our selections at the same time in Qlik. Up on the top, you'll see what's called the selection bar. This selection bar up here shows me all the selections that I've made. I can clear all the selections by clicking this clear button, and I'll be looking at all the data again. And if I come over here and I click on a couple of different states, a couple of different regions, and commit those, you can see that in my selections bar, those show up as selected. So I can actually manage my selections up here. I don't have to, in the design of my dashboard, have these list boxes in the dashboard. I can actually use this selection bar. I can click over here, and I can see all the fields that are available to me, and I can make selections in these fields very quickly and very easily and commit those selections, moves them up here, and then my dashboard now reflects those selections. And again, everything shows up on my selection bar. I also have a selection history, so I can go back through my previous selections. If I kind of want to go back and look at things the way I just did, I can go forward through that selection history and I can clear it. And I also have the ability to bookmark selections. So I've created a selection earlier called Great Lakes, and if I click that, you can see it picks the regions that are in the Great Lakes area, and it shows me the data for that. So basic, ClickSense 101, just to give you an introduction to ClickSense if you haven't looked at it before. I'll just clear that for a second. I also have the ability to click in the chart. So here you can see I have KPI indicators, bar charts. This is a tree chart, a donut chart, etc. I can go into this tree chart and click on supplies. I can commit that selection. You can see it shows up here on the selection bar, and I can go down here to this donut chart, and I can click on retail trade, commit that selection, and you can see that that shows up here as well. So I have two different selections up on my selection bar. I've actually used the charts to do my selections. So in theory, I could just get rid of these list boxes and use this real estate for whatever I wanted. I'm going to clear those selections out. Another way that we can interact with the data in ClickSense is on our line charts and bar charts. We can select a range. So I can come over here and I can drag, and I can pick a range on this line chart. I can then move that range up and down until I see the data that I want, and then I can pick that selection, and you'll notice up here on the selection bar again it shows up. It shows the year and month combinations that I picked as selected in green. So I can select a bunch of different ways here. I'm going to clear that out, and the next thing I'm going to show you real quick here is a year-over-year analysis. So I'm going to go to this different tab sheet here. Here I have sales amounts for the different territories, and this particular sheet is using something called set analysis. So this is in the expression language of Qlik, and it allows me to make a selection over here on the left. If I click on 2017 and commit that, and the set analysis is saying, okay, you selected 2017, so I know in the grouping over here on this bar chart to show you the year prior to that, which would be 2016. So you can see my selected year shows up in red, my previous year shows up in blue, and instead of doing a conventional hard-coded current year versus previous year, this gives the users the ability to interact with the data and pick whatever year they want. They can pick current year if they want, but they can pick last year and see how last year compared to the year before. They can pick current year, see how current year compares to last year, etc. And it's using this sort of set analysis syntax to do that. So we'll just go ahead and clear those selections. We'll go back up here. We'll take a quick look at order details. I just want you to see the searching capabilities that ClickSense has. So one of the dilemmas we have with data visualization tools is they're not always great at giving you the details. This is an example of, there's not a lot of data here, but this is an example of how we can go in, for instance, and search for an order ID. So we can come in here and we can look for, 352. We can pick that order ID, so as we type it immediately searches all that in-memory data, finds it, and when we hit enter, it'll select that, and then on the right we're seeing the line items for that particular order. And Qlik will handle this really, really well in high volume. So we see this typically happening with tens of millions or hundreds of millions of rows in memory. Is not uncommon to have this kind of capability. If we clear that selection out, you can see everything still shows up here on my selection bar. If we clear that selection out, we can also search, for instance, by customer or product name. So if I type in air, I can see all the different airlines that are in here, and I can pick one, and I can see all the orders for that airline, etc. So the searching capability is kind of built into Qlik. Very nice feature. I'll clear that. We'll go back up here to our sheet list. We'll take a quick look at customer geography. So ClickSense in its later releases here has built-in geo-encoding. It has the ability so that if you have cities or addresses or states or regions in your data, it will automatically geo-encode that and give you some mapping capability. So this is a conventional kind of map data scenario. If we zoom into the Chicago area, we can see the cities or villages where the different orders were placed. We can see our order volume over here on the right, and we can zoom down and actually see pretty fair level of detail. Qlik has a new product that goes even to more detail. It will actually give you geography down to the building level. For instance, it'll show you all the data within an airport. So we can plot data within an airport. They have kind of a neat demo where they show you all the device IDs of everybody who's logged into Wi-Fi in an airport and where they are at any given moment in time, so you can see where the crowds are. It's kind of neat. We can also select in here too. So we can select on one of these. We can go to Buffalo Grove. We have 7 orders there, and you can see up here on our selection bar, Buffalo Grove, right now Buffalo Grove and Wheeling got selected. And that selection will appear across the entire dashboard if we wanted to. So we can keep that selection, and we can go back over to our order analysis, and that selection has been applied to this dashboard. So we don't have to be on the place where we made the selection in order to have it apply. So that gives you kind of a quick overview of Qlik Sense. And forgive me, I'm moving kind of fast here because we're running behind. I do want to show you a couple more things here. So I want to show you, we're just going to close this application, and I want to show you how we take this data and make it into a QVD. So this is a little bit in the weeds. We'll just take a quick look at this. I'm going to go into the load script of this what we call QVD generator application. I just want to show you that it's basically going out and it's connecting to my SQL Server. So this is it's a CRM sample. It is a database in my 2016 SQL Server, and it's grabbing customer order information, order detail, and product data. So here's the SQL statements that it's producing, or that it's using, and then it's actually aliasing the names of these fields. So it's creating business-friendly names, and in some cases it's actually doing some data manipulation. So here it's doing a formatting of the date. In some other areas it may be doing some calculations, and so you can see here it's actually doing a calculation to create profit. So this is something that my data SME or my BI developer would produce, and then these statements at the bottom write that data out into these QVD files. So you can see here I have a Q customer QVD, a Q order info QVD, and these QVD files are now out on disk. So this is an application that we would run once a night or once an hour, and it would update these QVD files, and then we could use those QVD files to drive everything else, to drive self-service analytics, to drive Qlik Sense applications, etc. So this is the mechanism that we use to derive data and create the governed data sources. Okay, so I'm going to close this, and I'm just going to create a new application really quick here. I'm just going to call it test. And we're going to go ahead and open up that application. And I just want to show you how we can combine data from disparate data sources quickly and easily. So I'm going to go into what's called the Data Load Manager and Qlik Sense, and I'm going to choose to add some data. And I'm going to go out. I've got a connection already set up to my SQL Server. That's this OLADB connection. I'm going to go out to my SQL Server, and it's going to my CRM sample database, which just has my demo data in it. So this is just a conventional SQL Server database, and I'm going to pick a couple of tables here real quick, just so that you can see how we do this. So I've picked 4 tables: my customer table, order information, order item, and product tables. And I can choose which fields I want from those tables, so I don't have to pull all the fields in, right? So some of this stuff is stuff I don't really care about. I just really want, these 4 fields from here. Maybe I only care about the date placed, and I don't care about the rest of this. Order items, I probably want all of that. Product information, let's say I don't care about this stuff, and I just want these 4 fields. So now I can go and prepare the data, and it will issue those SQL statements and go out and pull that data back from SQL Server. So this should happen fairly quickly, and it will show me this data in the form of bubbles here. So each table of data that it's pulled in and manipulated, it's shown up here, and I can actually click on these and hold my mouse button down, and it will show me recommendations for how to join this data together. So if I look at my customer table here, it's saying, hey, your order information table looks like a pretty good match. That's what's showing up with the green. If I click on the order item table, it's saying, hey, your product table looks like a pretty good match, and your order information table looks like a pretty good match. To join these tables together, all I have to do is drag these bubbles together. So it's kind of a neat way to get all this built, so that we have all of our relationships, and then I can click on any one of these relationships and I can see how it's associating the data here, and I can actually change that association. So I don't have to keep what it decided. I can come in here and I can do a custom association. I can pick from the fields in one table and the fields in another table, and I can build this association myself, or I can let it associate. Okay, so now if I go back to my tables view, I can see the tables. Okay, we can go ahead and load the data. So it will now go out and grab the data, the fields that I picked from each of those tables, and it will pull them in. Shouldn't take too long here. Okay, and I'm just going to close it. I just want to check this table. I want to take a look here and see. Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and add more data. I want to come over here and grab from a folder. So I have this folder right here with some Excel data in it. I'm going to grab my territories, my sales territories table, and I'm going to pull it in. And I could actually rename these fields here. I could rename this sheet. Okay, but I'm just going to, in the interest of time, just go ahead and prepare this data and pull it in. And you're going to see that show up as a table here, and I can go back to my associations. You can see that table is not associated to anything. This is Excel data. It's got the $ in it. This is all SQL Server data. If I click on this, I can see that it associates well to my customer table. There's a common field there. I can drag it in and associate it. That's the region field. And now when I reload my data, it's going to go ahead and not only pull the SQL Server data in, but it's going to go ahead and pull the Excel data in, and we're going to have integrated data in this new application. So I'll just very quickly go in and edit this sheet. I'll show you. Here's all the fields of data that came in. Okay, and here are the different chart types. So I could just grab a bar chart and pull it over here, and we could add a dimension. And let's go ahead and pick the dimension from the Excel file, right, which was territory. And we could add a measure to that, and we could do, for instance, if we wanted to do a count of orders, what we might do is come down here and pick something like the order ID and ask to count it, and we've got a chart. So it's just that quick and that easy to pull data. So we're actually visualizing data at this point. We'll say done. We're visualizing data at this point from both Excel and from SQL Server. We did it without writing any load script, without having to type anything in. So ClickSense makes that relatively easy. It shows you how you can unify data. Now, ClickSense also gives us the ability to go into the data load editor, and we can see what it did. So there'll be this auto-generated area in the load script, this section right here, and it not only built out all of this load script for us, but it also, if you look at this, it also created all the geo-encoding data automatically for us. Now, if we wanted to unlock this, so we could go to this unlock, we could unlock this and we could edit this. So if we were a developer, if we were a Click developer, or somebody a little higher up on the food chain in terms of development capabilities, we could steal the code it wrote and we could augment this and change it and manipulate it any way that we wanted. Most tools are not giving you the ability to go behind the scenes to see the scripting that was generated and give you the ability to edit it. It's just the UI. Click has the UI. It also has the stuff behind the scenes, which we really like about the tool because it allows us to do more sophisticated manipulations of the data. So we can do things in this load script like slowly changing dimensions, etc. I want to show you some self-service. We'll just close this. I'm going to go into this self-service application. I want to kind of get you through a little self-service and a little reporting. I know we're running a few minutes late here, so I'll get you out of here as quickly as I can. And I just want to show you that this is just we just pulled some data in from SQL Server here. We're going to go into a pre-established sheet, okay, and you can see the sheet right here. And we could, if we have the appropriate rights, edit this sheet. So we could come in here and we could create a new chart type. We could go over and we could pick, a pie chart and drag it over, and we could add visualization. So we would simply pick a dimension, and it might be city, and we pick a measure, and maybe we want profit, etc., and it's calculating and it's doing that visualization for us. So one level of self-service is to take something that already exists and add things to it. We can also add new sheets. So I can create a new sheet here, and I can call it Tom's Sheet. And I can go into that, and I now have a blank sheet that I can add whatever visualizations I want. So if I go in, if I edit this, okay, I just want to show you a couple of things here. So there are database fields that show up here. So you can see I'm looking at all tables, and these are those kind of poorly named, non-business friendly fields. And there are something also called master items. These master items were built into this visualization, into this ClickSense application ahead of time. And they're broken out by dimensions and measures, and you can actually have charts and visualizations pre-built. So if I'm building a new sheet here, I can come in and I can say, you know, I'd really like to see a list of cities, and I can just drag that on, and the naming and everything is very clean for me right here, right? I can go to measures and I can say I'd really like to analyze profit by a list of cities. If I drag profit on, it builds a KPI for me. There's profit. Let's say I want to see cost under profit. Builds me another KPI, because these were predefined measures. And if we look at these measures, if we click on them, we can see not only is the name nice and clean and business friendly, there's a description of what it is. The expression syntax shows up, and tags can be associated with it to give me some sense of what this measure is really doing. Okay, so I can actually see some of the details of this measure, but this could be a very complicated, this one's obviously very simple, but this expression could be lines and lines of very complicated set analysis code that does some really cool stuff, right? That subsets the data and does calculations on sets of data and summarizes data. And it can be built into the application ahead of time, so that as a sort of level 1 self-service user, I can create a sheet and I can have this kind of capability where I can see these dollars change and I can see these KPIs without having to really write any expression syntax or understand anything about the underlying data. Don't have to deal with the goofy naming conventions that are in the database fields, etc. Everything is kind of clean and nice for me. If I close this and I go to this other demo here, what I want to show you here is that this demo is based on the QVD file. So real quick, I'm going to go into the data load editor just to kind of prove it to you so that you can see it. And those governed QVD files that we've been talking about, here they are. So remember, we talked about Q-customer QVD, Q-order detail QVD. So these are sitting out in a folder. They're getting updated once a night from a back-end process on the ClickSense server. And that's how the data is being loaded into this application. So now, when I go in and I create a new sheet, we'll just call it my new sheet for now, and I edit that sheet, if I look at the fields of data, so there are no master items here. Okay, I don't have any measures or dimensions or visualizations. I didn't do that. I just have the data that was loaded. Notice that the names are nice and clean, that I have a profit calculation in here that was predetermined. So I could do the same thing without those master items, and those QVDs are universal. Those QVDs can be used in 5 or 10 different dashboards. They can be used in a dashboard that feeds a report, so that that same governed data, that profit calculation, and these fields will flow through all the way through to the reporting engine and show you all of the same results and same information that you're used to seeing you know, in the UI. So again, if I wanted to see a list of customers, I could do that. If I wanted to see profit, I could pull that over here. If I wanted to see that in a chart, I could come over here and say, give me a bar chart, and let's do this by something that makes sense, product name, and let's add a measure that's a sum of profit. Okay, and now I see I've got my profit visualized here, and I can, if I say done here, I go in here and I can pick a range, and I can make selections, and I can interact with the data. Okay, so kind of a slightly lower level of self-service in that there's no master items pre-created for me. That governed data that's sitting out in the QVD Click data architecture is facilitating calculations and derivations of data and facilitating semantics, and is now becoming shareable across everything. So if we pop back over real quick here to our slides, we're kind of in this area of self-service that you see as the second S for ClickSense, and the data is coming from those QVD files. Okay, so we're going to do one more quick demo for you, and then we'll wrap things up. I'm going to go to, just going to change my view back over to Qlik so you can see the Qlik Sense system again. Okay, I'm going to close this application, and we're going to take a quick look at Inprinting. So this is the Inprinting console. Again, we're not going to demo the whole Inprinting product for you. If you're interested in that, please reach out to us, and Joe and I will be happy to get online with you and share, go through a more detailed demo of Inprinting and talk more about the specifics of it. We're just going to, I've got a couple of reports out here. I'm going to show you from an end user perspective first. So I'm going to pop open another tab here, and I'm going to go to what's called the Newsstand. So the Newsstand is an end user portal for reports. So I've got two reports out here. I've got a governed orders report, and I got a CRM status report. And the user, when they log into Inprinting, can see whatever reports have been sent to them in their platform. Those reports could have also been sent to them via email as a PDF or an Excel attachment. When you click on a report, you get a view of the report. So this is what an Inprinting report looks like. You can see on the first page we have a tree chart, and then we have a list of data, and then as we page through the report we see the list of data. Now this is a very basic report. We could have grouped this data and subtotaled it and made it a little bit more sophisticated, but this is a very basic report. So this is kind of how end users can consume information. There's also historical instances of this report. So you can see that I'm looking now at versions of this report that were run. You can see that at 5:32 p.m. on the 24th, this report, and we changed it to a tree chart, and it shows up as a tree chart. So we can have historical instances, and these are to run on a predetermined basis, and there's all kinds of end use and Inprinting to make sure that one report can be sent to multiple users, and those users only see the data they're allowed to see, whether that report comes to them via PDF and an email or whether it goes to the Newsstand. It handles that sort of bursting and that row-level security capability. If we wanted to go create a report, actually what we'll do, I think, is we'll edit a report. So we'll go into the governed orders report here, and we'll edit the report template. The Inprinting client, which is installed locally on your machine and communicates with the Inprinting portal, is going to come up. This report was actually authored using Excel as the mechanism for creating the report. So when we create reports in Inprinting, we have a Pixel Perfect report designer that's very similar to, say, a Crystal Reports environment, where we can do banded Pixel Perfect kind of executive quality reporting, but we can also use Excel or PowerPoint or Word to author reports. So what we've done is we've gone out to that demo self-service 2 application that's out in Qlik Sense. That's this guy right here. So remember, this report, or this application out in Qlik Sense was the one that was based on the QVD files, right? So this is governed data that's coming into this report. If you go back to Inprinting, I'm sorry, if you go back to the Inprinting designer, we can see that that's the report this is based on. And what we've done is we brought in a table of data from that report. So there's the columns in that table, and we've brought in a chart. So we brought in a couple of charts, actually, top 10 sales by state. These are objects that came in from that report. So that report or that dashboard can be updated, and then this report can be run from it, and it's the same governed data flowing through. And to create these reports, I'm just going to pop over to sheet 2, we can simply drag and drop fields right into Excel or into the Excel template to build this report out. So it's just this simple to build the report. And of course there's levels and pages and other things that we can do here that I won't go into today, but the way that this report was built was just dragging those into here and bringing them in. So we can bring in other kinds of objects from the underlying Qlik Sense application, and we can put them into the report to produce this report. We can preview the report just by clicking the preview tab, and it will actually open, it'll render the report, it'll go get the data, which means it's pulling the data all the way from the QVD files, the governed data source that we created earlier. It's pulling that data all the way in, it's rendering this report, and you can see as we scroll down, we see the data down here, and on sheet 2 we see those fields that I brought in here. I haven't done any formatting to them, but you can see that's how it's going to render the report. So we can close Excel, we can go back and we can manipulate this report. So these reports can be designed inside of InPrinting using the ClickSense applications. In some cases, we will create specific applications in ClickSense that are not visible to any of the users, purely for the purposes of facilitating data and objects to the report. In other cases, the actual report or the actual ClickSense application that users are consuming are used to facilitate the data to the report. And then inside of it, the InPrinting console, we can schedule all kinds of tasks, these published tasks. So you can see these are the two tasks that are running those reports and pushing them out to the newsstand for end users to get to. And then we could schedule other tasks in here that would also push these out to email or to other sources, write them out to a file on disk, etc. The other thing that's helpful with InPrinting, so if we think about the pyramid that we talked about earlier on, is there's no end user licensing for InPrinting. There's a server license, and we can distribute those reports and give access to Newsstand for an unlimited number of users. So now we don't have to go out and buy a ClickSense license for every single dashboard user that wants to be able to receive a report, maybe via PDF. So again, we have this broad number of users that fall into the use case scenario for reporting. InPrinting is something that plugs into ClickSense, uses the same governed data, and then facilitates it. That's the kind of stuff we really like about Click, because in all the other solutions, we have different tools doing the reporting and different tools doing the dashboards and visualizations, and we have to build an analytical data store or a data warehouse. That's great for my team. We love doing that stuff, but it's not necessarily the best way for you guys. So this is pretty quick and dirty. Putting this stuff together is usually days or weeks, not months, to get it up and running and get it working. And then you just keep adding content to it incrementally. Okay, I'm going to switch back over to our slides real quick here. We're going to wrap things up and let you guys move on with your day. Oops, wrong one. Hang on. Let's go to the slideshow. There we go. Okay. Okay, we covered all that. So here's kind of an overview of what we covered today. We talked about the analysis and reporting ecosystem and the pyramid, right? Inconsistencies between dashboards and reporting and some of the problems that we have with those. Desktop versus governed self-service analytics, and how having that governed data, having that QVD data architecture sitting in between the actual data sources and the dashboards and self-service and reporting use cases standardizes and ensures that we have consistency in those. We talked about the importance of semantics and materialization of the data, and how materialization is not just about kind of getting the data into one format, but it reduces the amount of round trips we got to make back to the data source, and it also makes sure that the latency of the data is consistent across those use cases. We talked about reporting and how important it still is and probably will continue to be, and how it's a missing link in a lot of solutions, and why we like Click, because it's got that to offer. And then a few things about what Click offers is that unified data governance, those QVDs that we talked about, self-service business intelligence and analytics at multiple levels in Click. So we saw the master items kind of level and the QVD kind of level, and then reporting and InPrinting using Click governed data. So we'll wrap it up here. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I know everybody's busy these days. Again, the slides are available if you want them, and we are also available to do more in-depth demonstrations for you, or if you want a consultation with me and Joe, we'd be happy to do a free initial consultation if we can help you kind of think through some things. That's what we're here for. Couple of things that are going on right now that you might think about if you're already a Click customer or thinking about becoming one. We have a ClickSense Quick Start, which is a flat rate ramp up to get you up and running on ClickSense. We have a ClickView 12 upgrade package that's also can be offered either flat rate or hourly to get existing kind of legacy customers off of version 10 and version 11 into the current release of ClickView. We have ClickView and ClickSense health checks. So if you're having problems with your platform, or you have ClickView documents or ClickSense applications that aren't behaving well, or that you're worried aren't accurate or aren't designed properly, we have health check engagements that we can offer on those. And then we also do a lot of data warehousing and analytical data store design build. So SQL Server, we do some cloud stuff with MySQL and Jasper and Talend. we're really good at that stuff. So feel free to reach out to me and discuss any of that stuff. I promise I'll try not to be too sales-ish with you and just really focus on the problem and make some recommendations. We also have some white papers that might help you with that stuff that we're happy to share. So again, feel free to contact us. We will try to do one of these webinars a quarter. So if you found this helpful and valuable, our next one is going to be a more deeper dive on self-service analytics. So we're going to take a look at some of the stuff we covered today, but in much greater depth. That's the goal for the next one. And in that next one, we'll also talk a little bit about user data management and supplemental data management and some solutions we've created around how you can continue to use Excel and you can continue to let users manage some of that data themselves, but in a more governed and more consistent way using some cloud solutions that we've developed. So we hope that you'll join us for that. Again, if you have any questions or need anything, feel free to contact me directly or give us a call or go to the website and just shoot us an email to the generic email address, and Laura or I will follow up with you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Joe and I will stay online here, so if you have questions, you can use the chat panel. We'll stay online for a little while to see if anybody has any more questions, but feel free to bail out at this point if you need to move on. Thanks again, and we look forward to talking to you soon.